Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for the movie One Night in Miami. Alright, so I got a chance to check out this one on Amazon Prime, right? This is an Amazon original movie, which is pretty impressive, right? And this one is definitely in that Best Picture conversation. So this review will be kind of part of this series that I'm going with on the channel, which will be taking a look at all of the Oscar contending films this year. So not necessarily Best Picture for sure nominees, right? Because of course we don't have those yet, but just movies that are in the conversation for, acting awards, Best Picture, screenplay, stuff like that. I'm going to be trying to do one a week for the next 10 weeks about. So I'm going to try to do about 9 to 10 films here. And really kind of dive into the Oscar race, and kind of share my thoughts on each one. And this one I was a little bit less kind of excited for. I didn't know as much about this one as Judas, where I did that one last week, and that one's quite long. Hopefully this one is not going to be as long of a review as that one, upwards of 40 minutes or something like that. So this one, not as much to say because I wasn't, that... it wasn't as an anticipated, release for me, obviously, because this one came out a little bit ago and I'm just seeing it now. But yeah, really interesting movie, and I still really wanted to get on here, share my thoughts, and of course hear your guys' thoughts on this one. I've seen a lot of really positive reviews of this one. One thing I was really looking forward to in this one, and to kind of see what I thought of it while compared to all the reviews and all the reactions that it's gotten, is this one's adapted from a play. And the biggest question here that I've seen everywhere is, does it transcend what it's trying to do as a play? Does it really work as a movie? And so I think that's kind of the core question going into this, and of course I'll share my thoughts on that one. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that question, and just in general what you thought of this film. Yeah, really like to discuss with you guys. That'd be great. And if you enjoy this review, please like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. Would really appreciate that. And like I said, I will be doing more reviews. I'm trying to do each week, right? Like one a week. I think next is probably going to be Minari, so I'll be tackling some of these Oscar films and sharing my thoughts going forward as well. So anyways, this one, so we'll just do kind of a quick recap and then my non-spoiler thoughts. Very, very broad. Nothing, gonna ruin anything for you. And then I will give a warning for spoilers, and I'll go into my kind of spoiler discussion, and we'll talk a lot about some of the events of the film, what works, what doesn't, and how those things all come together. So there will be some spoilers there. And then, of course, at the end, I'll talk about its Oscar chances. So what I think it will get, what I think it should get, stuff like that. So we'll dedicate a little bit of time to that at the end. So anyways, without any further ado, let's get into this one for One Night in Miami. So this film is directed by Regina King and written by Kemp Powers. So the screenplay that he wrote for the film is actually based off of his own play that he wrote. And I believe that this play premiered or was performed for the first time in 2017, I want to say. It might be 2014, I might be remembering that wrong, but it is somewhat recent. So this is not an old play by any means. This is something that Kemp Powers has written somewhat recently, and to be able to adapt it to the screen now, in pretty quickly, right, from when the play is performed in 2017, to adapt this to a screenplay, really impressive stuff. So really interesting to see him being the writer for this one, and then also Regina King directing, right? This is her directorial debut, at least for a feature film, I believe, and of course she's known for being, an Academy Award winning actress. And of course, I think a 4-time Emmy winner now. So a really, really great actress, and she's obviously known for that, but now, kind of seeing what she can do now as a director, and it's a really interesting project for her to join on and decide to direct. So a really interesting, kind of pair there behind this one. Really interesting. So this one stars Kingsley Ben-Adir, Aldous Hodge, Leslie Odom Jr., Eli Gorey, and then also has supporting performances from Lance Reddick, Michael Imperioli, and Lawrence Gilliard Jr. Those two very small roles in the film. I'd say probably about 10-15 minutes of screen time max, but two great actors that I really enjoy. Of course, Michael Imperioli from Sopranos and a whole host of other shows and movies. Escape of Dannemora, he was just recently in as well. And then Lawrence Gilliard Jr. from The Walking Dead, The Deuce, The Wire, I believe he had a role in that. So just two really great actors. And Lance Reddick, I've seen him in something before, but I couldn't quite place him. He's really great. Some comedic relief in this one, but again, a very small role. But that's just to say, of course, these four I'm going to talk about more in depth a little bit later as the main players, but even the supporting cast in this film, with just little small performances scattered throughout, are really, really great, and I really enjoy some of them and what they do in other projects too. So yeah, really awesome to see them here. So the movie is loosely based, and I do really emphasize that because, I'll talk about it later. But yes, very loosely based on true events, but it does focus on the night of February 25th, 1964, where Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, who would later become Muhammad Ali, of course, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke gather in Miami to see Clay's fight, and later they meet up together in Malcolm X's hotel room, and that's where we spend, I would say, the majority of the film, right? The beginning sequence and the end sequence are kind of a little bit separate, but I would say probably about an hour, 20 minutes of this film is pretty much just based in that hotel room and kind of the events surrounding that room. And of course, some of them leave, at times throughout the film, but it's really centered there. And that's kind of our main setting for this one. So from the offset, this film is very intriguing for several reasons, right? And I already touched on this, but Regina King's directorial debut, seeing what she has as a director and seeing this kind of move for her from acting to directing. And you see a lot of the times with directors where they'll act in it as well. But this one, she's fully taking on just the directing role. She's not acting in this at all. And so it's really interesting to see what she can bring. And then, of course, the adaptation of Kemp Powers' play. I'm not completely sure on how popular the play was, or still is, of course. But at least just to see this type of story be adapted to the screen is really intriguing as well. And I think adds to the overall kind of excitement about this one. The subject matter and the characters depicted here, obviously, really, really great. And just, again, like really intriguing. And of course, really relevant as well, in some aspects to today, for sure. That can't go unsaid when viewing this one, for sure. And some of these characters are obviously a little bit more known than others, right? Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, I would say, a little bit more popular than Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, but definitely four really influential people and in history. And I feel like they do kind of honor that in this film. And so to see those four depicted and being shown in this movie all together at once is really, really interesting. So this along, so these reasons of this intrigue and all that stuff, with the attention it has received from critics and various award bodies already, the Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, all these, it clearly makes it a pretty serious Oscar contender this year. And again, I'm not sure about other years. Obviously this is a very abnormal year where a lot of films that should have been here aren't here because they just didn't premiere this year. But for this year, I think it's definitely an Oscar contender and definitely going to be in that conversation for Best Picture win, and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, in other years, maybe it wouldn't be here. Maybe it wouldn't be as talked about as it, has been this year. But definitely such an intriguing movie, nonetheless, for sure. So, I wouldn't say that my expectations were overly high for it. As I said off the top, this wasn't one that I was really, really looking forward to. I knew about it. I knew some things, but, I also didn't know a lot of things about it. So, I didn't pay as much attention to it. And so my expectations were not as high as some other of the Oscar contender films this year. As a result, I would say that the film came fairly close to my expectations of this one. Overall, just to say as kind of a general thing, expectations weren't very high, and I would say they were pretty much met. So here are my kind of overall thoughts of the film without any spoilers. So While the film features some compelling performances, a really sharp script, and an incredibly intriguing story, fictional or not, right? Of course, it's based on true events, but a lot of fiction here. Either way, still really intriguing and still really immersive, captivating story here to kind of sink your teeth into. I will say it largely fails at transcending its theatric material and offering a true cinematic experience. Outside of a few short sequences throughout, the scenes of this film feel as though we are simply watching a stage performance. This is also emphasized by the overly dramatic and caricature style writing that dominates most of the film. As a play on screen, though, this works really, really well, right? This film is really, really good at just being a play and not really trying to be much more than that. But it definitely does leave something to be desired in terms of working as an immersive, compelling cinematic film where you're really invested in it. There's drama, there's kind of depth behind these characters that you can really, kind of follow in their shoes, really kind of see where those characters are and kind of relate to. And you don't really get a lot of that in this film. Instead, it really does play more as a play, right? It really does. And I just think it could have been adapted better because you have such great source material here. And I think it really did lend itself well to really being an effective film. But I just don't think that's what they were going for. And that's why I say that my expectations were pretty much met, because my expectations weren't that high. I knew that it was kind of this question of transcending this play material. And I really don't think it did. But then again, right, is that necessarily a bad thing if that's what they were going for? So I think with this film, it's a little bit hard to really, kind of flesh this out, because if you have a problem with the writing, if you have a problem with, kind of the meandering of the story, right, in the film, you kind of have to bring it back to, okay, well, this is based off of play, and maybe they weren't really trying to do much more than simply filming this play with a little bit of extra stuff here and there. So anyways, those are my overall thoughts, non-spoilers. So now I will give a little bit of a warning here for spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, or, you haven't seen the whole thing or anything like that, maybe come back here when you do. But anyways, so yeah, let's get into a little bit of discussion with spoilers now. Alright, so now let's get into a little bit of discussion with some spoilers here. So first off, I just want to highlight the performances. And this is something, of course, that everyone is talking about with this film. And I think that's probably one of the biggest focuses for, at least in the award conversation for this film. Because, I'll talk about my Oscar chances later. But I think the performances is probably the best bet that this film has at winning any Oscars or, winning any of these big awards. Because I think they are some really, really great performances. So, first of all, I just want to talk about Kingsley Ben-Adir as Malcolm X. To me, he really stood out, and I think he is. To me, I think he's gives a better performance or a more award-deserving performance than Leslie Odom Jr. And he's the one kind of getting nominated everywhere, and he probably will be nominated at the Oscars, but Kingsley Ben-Adir, man, he is really fantastic in this, and I just recently saw him in Soulmate Season 1 on AMC, their kind of Black Mirror sci-fi anthology, look-alike kind of series, and he was really great in that episode, really, really great, and that's the first time I ever heard of him. And then when I was kind of looking into that, I went, oh, right, he's the one playing Malcolm X in One Night in Miami, because I've heard a little bit about the movie, right? So he was really, really great as Malcolm X, and if you watch some videos of the real Malcolm X and just some pictures and stuff, they did a really good job in making him look like Malcolm X, but then he took that next step in really embodying that character, that person, right? It's a character of the movie, but it's a real person, right? And I thought this was almost comparable to, not as kind of, really compelling and shocking, but Daniel Kaluuya as Fred Hampton. I think both these actors really embodied these people and almost tried to replicate them. And I think they both did a fantastic job. Obviously, I don't think it's, an amazing performance that I've only seen, a handful of other times or anything like that. Obviously I think Daniel Kaluuya does a better job than Kingsley Ben-Adir. So that's obviously not just the best performance of this year, but I think it is still really, really great. And what is tough about this one, which I will talk about later, is that Amazon has actually put Kingsley Ben-Adir in lead actor, which really complicates his chances at getting the Oscar nomination and of course the win. But he is just really, really great. Again, embodying this person of Malcolm X, and just the kind of lack of emotion at times, but then when he needs to go there, he does show that emotion. Just the whole calm, collected nature of this character, and it is really it really brings you into it. It's a very charming performance, right? He comes off as very charismatic the way he speaks. So again, I just really think he did such a good job at playing this Malcolm X character, and of course the dialogue helps, because I think the dialogue almost helps in that delivery, because some of these lines are very just, kind of throwaway lines, but the way that Kingsley Ben-Adir is able to deliver them kind of brings out this kind of calm, collected kind of version of this character or this person. So really, really good job there. Leslie Odom Jr., probably the next best, if not only for his singing throughout the film. So he is actually, a very good singer, as we can all see in the film. He also sings the Speak Now song at the end, at the credits, which will definitely get nominated for the Oscars. So he is really great. He's a great singer, and I think he is good in this. I think he has some really great comedic moments in this. I think his character is probably, maybe Cassius Clay is a little bit more comedic, but I think a lot of kind of comedic relief comes from this character, and I think he really has the biggest arc as well in the movie of any of these four, in kind of starting at one point, going all the way up, and then kind of having this climax, and then at the end we kind of see a big change in that character, and so I think he really does a good job in playing that. And I think, again, there are, because of the dialogue, and because it's kind of like a play, you have some of these lines and some of these deliveries that are, again, really fast, right? A lot of this dialogue's really sharp, really fast, because that is really what a play is, right? And again, I think he's really good at kind of balancing those kind of emotional, serious moments with just those off-the-cuff kind of remarks of kind of spitting out whatever that character is thinking at that point. And again, that's where a lot of the comedy comes in as well. So, yeah, I think he was good. I wouldn't say that it was really... I had some pretty high expectations, because he's getting nominated for supporting actor everywhere, and I don't think it was necessarily outstanding or anything like that. But I think it is really, really impressive. But I think the singing is what really kind of gets him over the hump there, and really gets him into that conversation for a nomination at the Oscars this year. Again, in other years, probably not, but this year, for sure, along with that singing, and he does a little bit of dancing, too, so all that kind of brings in, all that kind of, is combined into this performance, which is really impressive. So, I also think Aldous Hodge is good, but rather restrained. The character of Jim Brown in this film doesn't really have a lot of emotion. I think there's one scene with him and Malcolm X at the table, I'm kind of remembering, and that one is a little bit emotional, but there's not a lot of range that Aldous Hodge is asked to show in this film, and I think that just kind of hurts his chances at any type of nomination or anything like that. But he's good. He's in City on a Hill with Kevin Bacon. I'm still not caught up with that show, but I really liked him in the episodes that I saw him in that one. But yeah, just not a lot of depth here, but he is very good in the role that they're asking him to play, for sure. And then Eli Gorey. He was in The 100. He's Wells from The 100. Absolutely love that show. And what else has he been in? He was in Riverdale as well. So he is a CW actor, and of course that does come with a little bit of reputation. I thought he was mostly good in this. I think he did overact in some parts, especially with that accent. Just kind of came off a little bit I don't know. It was just a little bit cringe-inducing at parts, at least to me. But maybe that is truly how Ali sounded at that age. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, I just felt like he overacted at some points in this film. He was a really likable guy, though. Again, really great comedic relief. But I just feel like he could have been maybe a little bit more grounded, and maybe a little less of a caricature of that character. But again, maybe that's what the script kind of gave him, and that's what he was working with. So, anyways. Of those four, definitely Benadir and Odom Jr. stand out. The other two, a little bit less, but Eli Gorey as well, Amazon nominated in lead, which is interesting because I think I would probably call him a supporting, but that's up to them. But as a lead, yeah, I don't really think nomination worthy, but definitely a notable performance and definitely a memorable one though. I think it was really impactful on screen. So this film, like I said in my kind of overall thoughts earlier, it works great as a play, and I would really love to see this as a play being performed on stage, really. I think I would just really enjoy this. It's an intriguing story with some really great dialogue. I mean, some really great dialogue. And again, it's dialogue heavy because it's written for a stage, right? The theater plays, this is the kind of stuff that you come to expect, of course, from that. And there's also really great character interaction, right? Like I said, this very quick dialogue and exchanges between characters at times is really, really well done in this film. And, of course, the small settings, and, of course, these performances really help that out as well. So it is really entertaining, just, again, this dialogue, this back and forth, and seeing these types of characters as well, obviously based off real people, and this kind of fictional, kind of almost dream-like story of, this is kind of what we wish happened at this night, right? Or this is kind of what we think would have went down at this night. And so, again, in that way, it's very impactful as well because, this very well could have, some of these conversations could have happened between these men. And perhaps if they did, they could have changed even more than they did. The ending sequence kind of shows a little bit about that. Of course, that's kind of based on what actually happened as well. But I think a little bit of kind of wishful thinking of, okay, the events of this night caused this, right? Especially with Sam Cooke. They Malcolm X and the others in the hotel kind of pushed Sam Cooke to give that performance then on Johnny Carson, I believe, right at the end of the film, and stuff like that. So again, I think it's really impactful because it shows kind of what could have happened or what maybe did happen. We just don't know, right? We don't know what actually did happen, or really even if they had these types of conversations that night, right? It just, I guess there's just not, those facts just aren't out there at this time. But anyways, as a play, really, really great. And again, I think I would really enjoy just going and watching this on stage. Not a big play guy or a theater guy, but this is a really intriguing one. And I think a lot of people would really enjoy it. Though, I don't think it works that well as a film. And I have a few things, to kind of support this. So, except for the beginning and end sequence of this one, this entire film could easily have been done on stage. And I really do mean easily. There's a very basic directing style throughout the entire film, and again, we can't really fault Regina King. It's her directorial debut, as I've said, ad nauseum here, but this is her first feature film, and to be a film about a play that's pretty much basically just filming a play, you really don't need a really complicated directing style or approach to this film, and so I respect it. It's a very basic directing style. There's a lot of close shots in this film. I really like the kind of far away shots where we see the entire kind of hotel room, these types of scenes in other films, right? Where you see these, the characters and you can kind of pan back and forth. But this one, it's a very, very kind of up close in this hotel room. There's not a lot of space that you get with a lot of these shots. A lot of kind of skipping and editing between when they talk instead of kind of moving the camera. So, or at least that's just what I picked up on. Maybe on a rewatch, I might see it differently if I pay more attention to that type of stuff. But to me, it just seemed like a lot of close shots and not a lot of camera movement. And again, that is just kind of embodying this play-like, approach to this film for sure. And there's not that much blocking either in this one. They really don't move around that much, and if they do, it doesn't, of course it will be blocked. I'm not doubting that. Of course, every movement really is going to be blocked, but it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of, moving around, blocking that really took some time and kind of thought. It really just seems like they're just kind of standing around in this room. One goes, sits on the bed, and you can almost see as well at times the kind of use of levels in this film, especially with some of the scenes with the bed, how they film the scene on the bed, where they have the two guys on one side, two on the other, and then you have the two tall guys at the back, the two short guys at the front. So again, maybe I'm just looking too closely at this, and maybe all films are filmed like that, probably, right? But just because of the way that the script works, and then accompanied by the directing style and everything and the way it looks, these shots, yes, it comes off very, very much like a play. But the beginning and end sequences, they could have been done on a stage, but it would have been a little bit more far-fetched. Again, I think the ending sequence to this film is maybe the best of the entire film, because it really does kind of break the mold of this play-like approach and show us kind of a montage, and that is something that is pretty much unique to film, and really kind of only possible in that medium. And so I think that really does transcend the kind of play-like material here. But other than that, there's really not a lot of transcending going on here. So the writing also doesn't lend itself well to a film, or at least very well. A lot of overly dramatic writing, right? Like just one little thing that someone says, you get a big kind of boisterous reaction a lot of the times in this. And again, that is a play, right? That's exactly the type of stuff that comes from a play. A lot of these characters are kind of over the top, caricature-like characters, if that makes any sense, right? A lot of them are kind of over the top reacting to these events, like I said, this very dramatic approach, and then they have this big fight, and then the next scene, it's kind of a mellow thing, and then a big fight erupts again. So these just kind of over the top characters that at times didn't really seem that realistic either, but I will say there's a little bit of drama in there. There's a bit of emotion. There are some deeper scenes in this, where we do see a little bit more of a kind of serious look at these characters. But yeah, the majority of a lot of those scenes are very over the top, really. And some of the comedy too is a little bit kind of extra, right? And one of the scenes too, or kind of one of the elements that sticks out to me when I'm thinking about this, is even the guards of the hotel room, right? Even the one guard that comes in and asks for their signatures or something like that. Like that's funny. That really works in a play. But even just the reaction of Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay, the character, is just, again, this really over-the-top, big reaction that you don't typically see in a film. Or at least kind of a film of, of really serious kind of immersive qualities or an approach to it, right? For sure. So yeah, great dialogue, really sharp, snappy, but not that realistic. Some of the, and that's a big thing too. None of this dialogue is realistic to the time at all. Maybe some of it, but a lot of it is very, very like recent, kind of ways of talking to each other and terms used in this one. So again, it's a fictional retelling, of course. But yeah, I would have liked to see a little bit maybe more of that realistic dialogue if that's what they were going for. And yeah, not really a lot of depth. Really, Leslie Odom Jr.'s character is really the only one who has a really kind of solid, defined arc in this one. Jim Brown, not really, right? At the end, he decides to quit football and pursue his movie career. Well, he was going to do that before they got together in the hotel that night. Cassius Clay's Muhammad Ali was already, converting into a Muslim, and kind of pursuing that before they got together that night, right at Malcolm X. I mean, nothing really changes at all for him in this scene, sorry, in the scenes that play out in the room. But Odom Jr. is the one that does change, because he comes in this certain way, and they all kind of accuse him, but mainly Malcolm, of not doing enough, right? Not doing enough, performing for the white people, but then kind of ignoring the stuff about the black community, and all this stuff. So he really does change by the end of it, because he does that performance on Johnny Carson, which is a step in the right direction. And so you really do see that arc for him change, and he's really the only one that has that arc, or any really significant depth in this one for sure. The performances reflect this kind of play-like writing as well. I think some of these performances would be absolutely incredible stage performances, and I know probably a lot of these actors did do some theater, right? Pretty much every movie actor, I believe, at some point probably does some theater, right? And so a lot of these guys would have been really great on stage, but the moments, again, of emotion and range don't land as well as they maybe do in other places and in other media, in other films, because the writing doesn't really give a lot of build up to these moments. Again, very big, over-the-top reactions to things that don't have a lot of build up to them, right? Like, we don't really... I'm trying to think of a specific scene. Maybe something like, something like Malcolm accusing, right, Sam Cooke in some of those scenes. This we don't have a lot of build up to. We don't really know this friendship, this relationship between the two going into it. And some of these scenes are very, this immediate reaction out of nowhere. And so that makes it a little bit harder to pull off these moments tonally. Because again, you're really kind of quick dialogue, sharp, back and forth, a little bit of comedy in there. And then you get really serious really quickly. And it's really hard to pull that off in these performances, but I think some of these guys really do that well, and we definitely see that. But again, it is a little bit harder with that type of writing and with that tone that they're kind of towing the line on throughout the film. So to me, that kind of makes these performances feel a little bit less Oscar-like, because again, really over-the-top kind of caricature-style characters don't typically do well at the Oscars. Really, like, obviously some performances, kind of bit performances, right? I guess something like a Laura Dern in Marriage Story. I hate to use that example like every time I talk about this, but that's a little bit more of a bit performance. Alan Arkin in Argo, right? Like, there are definitely examples of this, but that's kind of what each performance feels like in this movie, and they just don't get recognized that often. So to me, in any other year, I don't think anybody here would be getting nominated for Oscars, but I don't think that's necessarily their fault. I think that's just the material that's presented here and the way that this film plays out as a play, right? So just want to touch on, lastly, the largely fictional story. So really, when they say based on true events, it's very loosely based, of course. The only true events were that all four men were in Miami that night to watch the fight, and that they spent it together. So those are the only facts, right? That all four guys were in Miami, and that they spent it together at some point in that night. That's all we know, right? However, they did do a great job of capturing those four men, the actual people, and the surrounding events during the period in this film. Yes, it's a fictional story. Yes, we only have very little facts to back this up, but they actually did a really good job in capturing how Malcolm X, for example, felt in 1964. What his kind of reactions were to the Brotherhood and him leaving. They really did a good job at really getting those kind of thoughts accurate. If you watch some interviews from around that time, really, really good job at really capturing what that was and what that was like for Malcolm X too at the time. Same with Muhammad Ali, some really great capturing there of his thoughts and the way that his kind of perspective on things was at that time, specifically in 1964. And of course, the events. The fight was really well captured, I think, with the attention it had and all of the kind of popularity around Muhammad Ali going into that, and just kind of how big that really was. And I think they really captured that as well. Another thing that kind of comes in after I looked a little bit into this is that picture of Malcolm X and Cassius Clay, or Muhammad Ali, at the bar in real life compared to the scene in the movie is like uncanny. It's really, really interesting where Malcolm X has the camera and he's taking a picture of the three guys. Well, in real life, it was actually just Cassius Clay at the bar sitting there. The other two men were not there. But it looks so alike with the way that Malcolm X is holding the camera and everything. Like, it's really, really cool to see the way that they were able to replicate or recreate some of these real pictures and real scenes, in this film. Really, really impressive stuff. And again, this was not only in the writing, because yes, of course, the writing plays a massive part in this, and the way that these characters were structured, the dialogue that they say, but also the performances. Because again, Kingsley Ben-Adir playing Malcolm X could have easily approached this from, stuff about Malcolm X from 1965, right? Or even maybe earlier. But I feel like, again, he really in his performance depicted Malcolm X in 1964 on February 25th, right? On that date in time. And really, really enjoyed the way that they were able to do that. And I think this film deserves a lot of credit. I think Regina King, Kemp Powers, both deserve a lot of credit in what they were able to pull off in this one. And being able to, obviously the performances embodying these individuals, but then also being able to capture those moments and the kind of overall environment, the feeling, the atmosphere of this time period and this specific night. Really, really great job at that. So just wanted to talk about that as well. Yes, it's fictional, but I think it does a really good job at, at least trying to capture what facts we do have about that night and the overall story for this one. All right, so let's end off with the Oscar chances. I've talked about it throughout the review here. But yeah, I think it does get a Best Picture nomination. Again, in any other year, I don't think we're talking about this one even in the conversation. But because it is this year, and we're obviously at a little bit of a kind of interesting time for the Oscars, there's not a lot of really big movies that were supposed to come out this year. Here up for nomination, yes, I think this one definitely gets Best Picture. Supporting actor for Leslie Odom Jr. is pretty much locked in as well. He's been getting it everywhere, and, no doubt that he gets it here. I think Kingsley Ben-Adir, again, if he was in supporting, I think he definitely deserves a nomination, even over Odom Jr. for this one. But because he's in lead, it just makes it a little bit more difficult for him to get in there, because it really is kind of a crowded category this year, and supporting is really not. So again, just depending on what they were kind of set up for Amazon, really kind of dictated how well they were going to do. And Odom Jr. as supporting definitely is going to be in there, I think. Original song, for sure, is going to be in there, from Odom Jr. and Sam Ashworth, I believe, right? And what is that Speak Now, right, is the song that plays at the credits. Another really good one. I said that about Fight For You with Judas as well. Another really good song. I really like these original songs. Where you have some involvement from the cast, at least, right? Some of these, songs are just from a pop artist, and they come in, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, but it sounds good, right? But these songs that are actually something like A Star Is Born comes to mind too, right? Really awesome soundtrack. And Shallow is such a good song from Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper that are actually in the movie, and it really means something, right? This song and at the end credits really means something for this movie. So again, I really think it's going to be in there, and it might win. It might win, right? Adapted screenplay, it's for sure in for here as well. I think it definitely deserves this. Again, yes, it's like a play. It's not really much of a, film, right? It's really not much of a cinematic experience, but the writing here is still really good, and I think it's definitely deserving of a nomination, at least for adapted screenplay, right? That category is a little bit more loose, and so I think it really lends itself well to that discussion as well. I don't think this is going to get director. I guess it could. I really don't think it deserves. I think Regina King is going to go on to make some really good films following this one, because I think she has that potential. We've seen it now in this one. I just don't think that this was a really good directing movie. I think a lot of the choices here were very basic and not a lot of really flashy stuff. I think if she does get the director nomination, it would simply just be because of her name and what she's known for being, an actress, which would be unfortunate, but we might see it. It might happen, but I would say it's unlikely. I don't think it's going to get director. Like I said, I think Kingsley Ben-Adir deserves a nomination, but he is in lead, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. So, anyways, those are kind of my thoughts on the Oscars stuff. Could this get something else, something kind of crazy? These are just the main ones. Of course, some of the technical categories it might receive as well, but we'll have to see. As it gets closer to, I believe March 16th is the big day for nominations, so we'll definitely look forward to that one. So yeah, anyways, guys, those are kind of all my thoughts on this one. It's a really intriguing story. It's entertaining, some really great dialogue and some compelling performances, but it really doesn't transcend the play-like material that's kind of presented here. And, you might like that and some might not, right? I'm kind of in the middle. I enjoyed it. I just don't think that it's really that impressive of a film. And again, in any other year, I just really don't see it being an Oscar contender. But nevertheless, it is definitely there this year and in the conversation. And I am really happy that I checked it out. So yeah, love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. What do you think of it? Do you agree? Does it really transcend that play story? Does it really, make itself a compelling film for you, or does it not, right? I just love to hear your guys' thoughts either way and discuss this one with you guys. So anyways, those are my thoughts on One Night in Miami. Hopefully we'll be reviewing Minari or News of the World, one of the two, maybe next week. We'll see what I get into there. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this one, and we'll see you in my next review.
Off the road, can you hear the bells ring out? Speak now, speak now.